Hey everybody, Steve Dawson here from the Henhouse studio in Nashville, Tennessee. And I have decided to put together a little bi-weekly expose of tracks that I've worked on over the last 20 years or so. And yeah, I'm just going to pluck a song from a record I produced or engineered or played on or something and pull up the tracks and remember how it all went down. And there will be some surprises for me as well. A lot of these I have not heard or looked at for quite some time. So this is going to be available on my Patreon page for the Music Makers and Soul Shakers podcast. And it will be, this one's going to be available everywhere, but every couple weeks I'll do one of these and they will be available to Patreon subscribers of any level. And so let's get going. The first one that I'm pulling up here is from 11 years ago. This was 2009, and it was a tribute record that I organized and put together for a string band from the 1920s called the Mississippi Sheiks. And this is the album here. It's called Things About Comin' My Way, and they were a pioneering string band, sort of a family band. There was the Chapman family, Sam Chapman, and his brothers would come and go, and this other guy named Walter Vinson, who wrote a lot of the great songs. And they were huge at the time. They were a top-selling string band. They were a band, too, and there wasn't a lot of bands in those days. There was like a lot of solo artists. So they were unique in that way. And I just loved it. They had this huge hit, Sitting on Top of the World, which was, you know, a hit for everyone from the Grateful Dead to Frank Sinatra and lots of other people did versions of that song, and it comes from them. And they had all these other great songs too, and so I wanted to bring people in that could sort of replicate their vibe a little bit, but then also people that had nothing to do with their vibe at all, and just sort of emphasize their songs and how great they were. And so I approached Bruce Cockburn about doing a song, and I thought that he would first of all, like, be able to relate to the style so much with the way that he plays the guitar, which has, you know, some influence from blues and ragtime and things like that, where the Sheiks were coming from. And yeah, so there's, I don't know, I can't remember how many songs there are. There's 17 songs on this record. It was yeah, it's a lot of songs. Anyway, this is his song. It's called Honey Babe, Let the Deal Go Down. And if you want to check out the finished product, I'll put a link to it somewhere, but it's been on Bruce Cockburn compilation as well, and it appears on this record. And so I'm going to pull up the tracks here. I got them sorted out here last night, but until then I have not looked at these tracks in quite some time. And it was great to see. It's quite a simple recording. So basically what happened was I organized a band down in Seattle at a great studio there called Avast, with a guy named Stuart Hallerman that runs that place, and that studio is still going. And so it was myself on guitars, Keith Lowe on bass, Matt Chamberlain on drums, and Wayne Horvitz on organ. Great band. And then we would bring in artists throughout the day, so each person got a couple of hours, basically. They would show up, we would run through the song with them, we'd record it, they'd say, cool, and then they'd split, and then the next person would come in. So we did that for quite a few tunes that day and got a whole ton of great music done. And this was one of the songs. And so Bruce showed up. He was super prepared. Like, there's some pretty intricate finger-picking guitar stuff, as Bruce is known for, and he showed up like totally prepared. And that doesn't always happen, I'll tell you. In fact, it usually does not happen that people come really prepared. But Bruce was fully prepared. He knew exactly how he wanted the song to go. He knew exactly how he wanted to play it, and he had it all worked out. And he basically, like, I think we rehearsed it and probably did 3 rundowns from top to bottom of the song. And from take to take, there was so little variation from him. And I don't mean that in a bad way at all. It was like, he's just so consistent of a guitar player and a singer that really I was more like picking which band track was the best, because his were all so good. and I do remember being struck by that. So that happened. It was great to do it. It happened really fast. Up until that point in my career, I'd produced quite a few records, but I had never mixed records. I'd always shipped tracks off to be mixed. And I remember being in the car with Bruce, and he said, "Hey, who's going to mix this?" And I said, "I don't really know. I haven't decided yet." And I told him about how my process involved me usually going back and forth quite a bit with a mix engineer, because I'm pretty picky and I knew exactly what I wanted to hear and all that kind of stuff. And he said, "Well, why don't you just mix it yourself?" And ever since that day, I've basically mixed everything I've ever produced. So thanks to Bruce for that. Anyway, it was very exciting to have him in the studio, and he was wonderful and very accommodating. And so it was me and Keith and Matt and Wayne were the band. We were all in one room together. So there's lots of bleed in between the instruments. And then Bruce was isolated in a booth off to the side. So he is very well isolated, his tracks. But he is playing live with us. There's no fixes, there's no overdubs. There are overdubs, but there's nothing that was done to the band tracks. Yeah, let me show you what we got here. So first of all, we got Bruce. And interestingly, he had a microphone on his vocal, obviously, and then a microphone in front of his guitar. I believe it was a Neumann U87. But I ran into issues with phase, which is like a timing thing in between the signals hitting the guitar and the vocal mics and kind of canceling out certain frequencies. And I wasn't super excited about the idea of using an internal microphone, because I always think that sounds weird, having a microphone inside a guitar. But in this case, that microphone sounds awesome. And it solved the problem of having some of these issues with the outer guitar while he was singing. So all of the sound that I ended up using is from the inside of Bruce's guitar, which is very unusual for me. I don't usually do stuff like that. Also, I was learning about phasing at the time, and now I know a lot more about how to deal with it. But back then I didn't know as much about it. So that's what happened. And then when he plays a solo in the middle of the song, and at that point I flip the microphones over and I use the outside mic, which sounds radically different, but it also makes the solo jump out. So let me just play a little bit of Bruce playing and singing. This is Bruce. Where is he? Here he is.
Babe, please let the deal go down. Honey, babe, please let the deal go down.
Beautiful.
We can get the money, walk on down through town.
So he was really like just dictating that groove and laying it down, and we just had to follow him through it. It was fantastic. So at that point the drums come in, and you can hear there how isolated he was, and that's because he was in that little booth off to the side, and there's basically no bleed. You don't hear the drums in his microphones at all. But the drums come in next, and let's check them out. So this is Matt Chamberlain, and he's playing this amazing old vintage Ludwig, I think it was a Ludwig, or maybe Slingerland Radio King kit from the 50s. It sounds amazing. The kick drum is huge. And he's just playing brushes and laying it down simply and perfectly. And then Keith is on bass. Keith Lowe, wonderful bass player. He's playing upright bass. So this is Keith coming in right here. Now you can hear in Keith's microphone, you can hear the drums. So this is just Keith soloed, and you can hear drums. He's probably 15 feet away from Matt on the drums right there, but you can definitely hear them in there, so you know he's in the same room. So those guys together with Bruce.
Would be. I've traveled uptown, traveled the whole world through.
Okay, and then I was playing the Weizenborn Hawaiian guitar, which is a lap steel, acoustic lap steel. Now it's a very quiet instrument, and so in my microphone there's a ton of drums, and you know what? It's just the way it is. It sounds cool, and I don't really worry about bleed a lot. That's a hot issue in recording now. In modern recording, people like to have very clean signals from instruments with no bleed of other instruments into those microphones. Pretty much every record I like that's not really a factor. So that's the way I work too, and I don't worry about when there's bleed. It's just part of the thing. It makes stuff sound cool. So this is my guitar that I was playing live, and I'll just solo it so you can hear what it sounds like, but also so that you can hear how much drums are in it. So that's just my microphone. There's as much drums as there is my guitar. You can hear the bass in there too. Alright, so then the organ comes in. So this is Wayne Horowitz, and he's playing some beautiful, subtle organ, and it sounds like this. It's just, it's in the same room. Actually, no, so he's playing a B3 organ through a Leslie, and that Leslie is off in another room, and that's why it's not bleeding into our microphones. You're not hearing that in the room mics at all, and it's because it's isolated, but it sounds like this. So nice and distorted and cool sounding. Actually, when you just put Bruce in with the organ, it sounds amazing. Check this out.
I've traveled uptown, traveled the whole world through. I've traveled uptown, traveled the whole world through.
Awesome. Okay, and then what happens is, so everyone's playing, that's the live band right there, that's everybody in the live situation. Then what I mentioned before is that Bruce takes a solo, and at that point I flip the microphones over. So I want to show you what happens there. So here's him playing and singing, just soloed, and then all of a sudden his other microphone that's in front of the guitar kicks in, because he's not singing anymore, and that problem I was having goes away because I take the vocal microphone away. So here's what that sounds like.
Found a woman looked as sweet to me as you.
This is inside the guitar, then all of a sudden, 1, 2, here it comes. It's the same take, it's just a different microphone. So good. And there's a funny thing that he does here. So the Sheiks, a lot of the times they would sing a verse and then they'd go, step on it. And that was like the cue for somebody to play a solo, usually like a fiddle player in their band. But Bruce adopted that little saying, and you can hear him do it right here.
Looked as sweet to me as you. I'll step on it now.
That's actually even funnier too, because it's him that takes the solo, so that's cool. Anyway, I thought that was awesome that he did that. That was unprovoked and unasked for. He just did it. Okay, so that takes us up through the solo. And then there's this funny track here of me, it's a tremolo, and so I wanted to add in just some textural stuff. Now, I lived in an apartment at the time, and I didn't have, I wasn't able to play like loud electric guitars. So I must have plugged it, I don't really remember what I did, but I must have plugged it straight into the mixing board and just recorded it straight, because it's marked as tremolo, but it's certainly not tremolo here. So it means that I must have added it with some studio trickery later. But here's that track. that's the one thing that on the finished thing, it doesn't sound like that. It sounds like a tremolo. So tremolo is like varying volume that goes wah, 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 wah. So I would have added that in later, I guess. So that's the one thing that sounds different from the finished track, is that thing there. And that comes in about halfway through the song and stays for about a third of the song and then goes away again. Okay, now the last other element that was added in was, this was Bruce's idea too. He said, hey, you know what would sound cool in this song is a trombone, and I agreed. So I shipped, after we finished this, I shipped the track off to David Travers Smith, a friend of mine in Toronto, and he recorded William Carn, who's a fantastic trombone player, and he sounds like this. Sounds like a trombone. Sounds like a great trombone. So that's what happened here. That track was done in Toronto about 3 weeks later, probably. So here's how it sound. Here's how the trombone sounds coming in.
Would be. I've traveled uptown, traveled the whole world through.
So that's cool. And that kind of stays in for about half the song as well, and it just sort of does like little fills and all that. So it's a really great addition. That was a lot of fun. I was not involved in that track. And then the very last thing was, after we finished, we were hanging around listening, and Bruce said, hey, you know what would be cool is, why don't we get everybody and just sing the last verse together? So that's what happened. We got everybody around. So I can hear Bruce in here. I can hear me in here. I can hear my wife, Alice, in here, who's a big Bruce Cockburn fan, and she was very enthusiastically singing, I think. And I think Ndidi Onokulu is in here, and because she was there that day. And Keith Lowe is in here, I remember. I think Matt Chamberlain is in here too. I don't know how enthusiastic he was about singing, but anyway, here's what that sounds like. So this is 4 tracks, so we overdubbed 10 of us 4 times, so there's probably about 40 voices here. Here, I'll solo it.
Honey, babe, please let the deal go down.
Good fun.
Honey, babe, please let the deal go down.
And so that comes in for the last verse of the song, and then the last verse ends, and then Bruce does this beautiful little guitar outro, and that's the end of it. So I'll just play you that part.
Honey, babe, please let the deal go down. We can get the money and walk on down through town.
Here comes the outro. That's a beautiful little thing. That's it. It was a great day, great session, very memorable on many levels, and I hope you enjoyed hearing a little bit about it. And please go and listen to it. The album, again, is called Things About Coming My Way, a tribute to the Mississippi Sheiks, and we'll see you in a couple weeks for another one of these. Thanks for checking it out.